Hello and welcome to the Finance Quarter. I'm Andrew Robertson. On the program today, that trip to the UK you've always wanted. Get ready for the sting at the airport when it's time to come home. And making weather forecasters look good. 20 economic predictions from our experts and all of them wrong. But first today's superannuation, and it seems every time the government brings down a budget it makes changes to superannuation, and the recent mid-year budget update was no exception. The co-contribution has been gutted, and in its place the rebate of the contributions tax for low-income earners has been streamlined. Well, is it a good move or a bad move? A person who knows is Pauline Vamos, and she's the Chief Executive of the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia. Pauline, the government has abolished the need for low-income earners to lodge a tax return to get their 15% super contributions tax back, and at the same time it's wound back the co-contribution scheme. How will that be better?
It'll be better for more people because the government co-contribution, and this is where you find or try and find an extra 1,000 after-tax dollars, you put it into your fund, and then previously, before these changes, the government would then match that $1,000. Now, the statistics were that only 1 in 5 people that were actually eligible for that co-contribution actually took it up. So you had four out of the 5 missing out, and that's not good. What this change does, it means that you get the rebate on your 15% contributions tax whether you do something or not, which means that in the end it costs the government a bit more, but it means that all low-income earners get that rebate, and what it means is that all low-income earners get that boost in their superannuation account. So instead of they immediately get a 15% boost, which means that their ability to get better retirement outcomes, the more money you've got in the account with compound interest, the quicker it grows. So it's about growing the account quicker. So more people's account will grow. But also remember, there is still some co-contribution. So yes, you won't get the $1,000, but if you find an extra $500, which is not easy, but if we like to find the extra $500, the government will still give you $250. So when you think about it, for low-income earners, they get the rebate, plus they get an extra $250 for claiming it. That is an enormous boost to their retirement savings.
Now, there were 2 other changes, and I'm just wondering if you're as enthusiastic about one of them in particular, and that's the postponing of the lifting of the contribution cap for people under the age of 50.
That was a disappointment. The idea around this public policy was that that as we live longer and as we've got CPI changes, that people will be able to add a bit more. And so this pausing of that indexation is not good for people who are hoping to put in that extra amount next year. But again, we're in very difficult times.
Now, the last change is the abolition of the 70-year age limit for super contributions. I imagine you'd think that's a pretty good one.
Look, we do, because there shouldn't be a limit on how people can really get the best out of their super. And the great thing about abolishing that limit, one, it recognises the value and the productivity of our more senior workers and our older workers. It also means that you can put in different strategies on transition to retirement. Now, there are many people at 70 who are valuable to any employer, want flexibility, but they should get their super. We've got to stop this age discrimination, because you've still got a long way to go, even if it's another 10 years. Remember, when compulsory super first came in, people were living an extra 5 to 6 years after retirement. This reflects that.
Just finally, super's been going backwards now for a number of years. Why is it still a good investment?
Number of reasons, and I dispute that, Andrew. It hasn't been going back. You're still better off putting your money in super than in a bank account, and we've done the figures to prove it. So you're still much bigger off. Remember, super is an investment. and there's $163 billion worth of super money in the banks in cash. Okay? We drive economic growth. We put money in infrastructure. We put money in shopping centres, in roads, in rail, in ports, and that drives economic growth. So from a big picture, which most people say, well, you know, this is about me, but big picture, it drives economic health of the Australian economy.
There'd be a lot of people that look at their statements every 6 months from their super fund and be wondering to themselves, you know, what am I doing here?
When you add up the taxation benefits, when you add up the value of the insurance that you are provided, superannuation is still the best game in town for the average punter, particularly about funding for their own retirement. And we know people won't save voluntarily for retirement. 9% and going to 12%, which we think is very, very necessary. You've got to think about longer term, you are going to be much better off.
Pauline Varmos, we'd expect you to say that. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure, thank you.
The United Kingdom is one of the most favoured Christmas overseas holiday destinations for Australians, but the British government seems determined to make us remember our visit for all the wrong reasons. From next April, it's raising its departure tax to $140 for people flying economy and a whopping $280 for those travelling business or first class. Now, Australia's departure tax of $47, which in itself is exorbitant, pales by comparison. What that means is, for a family of 4 who might be planning to travel to Britain next Christmas, they'll be paying $748 in combined departure taxes, and if they're lucky enough to travel business or first class, that will be $1,308 just to walk out the door.
To think next year they'll host the Summer Olympic Games, where there'll be hundreds of thousands of visitors coming to London, and they've applied this tax for every single person that comes there, which might help the balance of payments or the total budget of the UK government, but it's not going to do anything for the people who visit the country.
Now, speaking of the United Kingdom, a sad fact of life for Qantas is that 4 out of 5 Australians who travel there do so with other airlines. It's the reason why Qantas International is hemorrhaging tens of millions of dollars and why Qantas is having a very public battle with its unions to try and lower its cost base. Now, a man who knows the aviation industry well is Dick Smith, the former chairman of the Civil Aviation Safety Authority, and he very firmly believes that the fate of Qantas is in the hands of the Australian travelling public.
Australian voters, we're a democracy, want the cheapest international airfares with low globalised prices. That means low globalised wages. It basically means we can't have an Australian-owned airline paying Australian wages. That's impossible. 8 out of 10 people now don't fly with Qantas. If we want Qantas to remain as an international airline, we've actually got to buy an air ticket on it.
Now, never one to pull his punches, Dick Smith has no doubt who's to blame for the huge losses Qantas is suffering as passengers choose to travel with other airlines. For Dick Smith, the buck stops in Canberra.
Be honest. Stop blaming the Qantas management or stop blaming the Qantas unions. You've decided that we should have all this capacity and competition from low-cost international carriers. Well, the result is Qantas will either go broke or it'll have to move over offshore. All caused by our politicians, but they blame everyone else.
2011 is a year which seems to have taken economists by surprise. Now, the reason I say that is that back in January we asked 5 leading economists to make some predictions on where they saw key economic indicators being at the end of the year. Sadly for our economists, all 20 of their predictions were wrong. At the start of the year there was optimism in the air, and that was reflected in our experts' forecasts. But as Dr. Nigel Stapledon from the University of New South Wales succinctly puts it,
the year hasn't turned out quite as expected.
All our experts had been looking for big things from the stock market, with St George Bank's Bessedetta leading the way just ahead of KPMG's Nikki Hutley. However, within weeks of those forecasts being made, there was this, and then this, and then this, and then the seemingly never-ending saga of Europe. The stock market laboured all year, shedding 10% and blowing our experts' forecasts out of the water.
Company profits have probably done better than most people expected, but share markets haven't followed. And really it's been a year where the risks have really been macroeconomic.
So we've had a really tough year from all sorts of fronts. Notwithstanding that, there's still some really strong positives for the Australian economy, but that message is just not getting out to the market.
Our experts found the going just as tough with their interest rate predictions. Their early year optimism had them all predicting rate rises of at least 0.5 percentage point, something the Reserve Bank itself might have envisaged till about June. But softening global and domestic economic conditions took their toll, and on Melbourne Cup Day, the big winners were home buyers as interest rates were cut.
We had the floods in Queensland and Victoria, and that meant that the growth in the first half of the year was also a bit disappointing for the Australian economy.
The dollar brought more joy for our experts, and as it dropped below parity with the greenback in November, it looked as though Perpetual's Matthew Sherwood, St George Bank's Bessedetta, or the University of New South Wales' Nigel Stapleton would be right. However, yet another surge in what's been a volatile year took all our experts out of the money.
The fundamentals underpinning the Aussie dollar remain the same, and that is attractive interest rates in Australia, a firm underlying economy in Australia, attractive ratings for our sovereign debt rating, as well as we have a stable financial and banking system.
When it came to unemployment, none of our experts was expecting it to rise this year. Russell Investments' Andrew Pease was the closest to getting it right, predicting no change. KPMG's Nikki Hutley at the other end tipping a big drop to 4%. In reality, unemployment went up to 5.2%.
The mining sector is a distinct positive, but I suppose underestimated the negatives in the non-mining sector, which are under pressure from that high dollar and interest rates and the like.
20, which is the total number of predictions made by our experts, and not one of them was right. The first time that's happened in all the years we've been doing this segment. That either says a lot about our experts or the fact that 2011 was a very challenging year to predict.
Well, I think it's an important lesson, isn't it? It's an important lesson that you shouldn't base your investment strategies on the opinions of so-called experts.
For what it's worth, all our experts are predicting that next year will be a less volatile year than this year. Now, in fairness to our experts, it's the first time in all the years we've been doing that segment that all of them have got every prediction wrong. Well, that's it for another edition of the Finance Quarter. As always, if you'd like to see any part of the program again, you can find us on the ABC News website. Just go to the business page and click on the Finance Quarter icon. And if you'd like to contact us, we're on Twitter at the address on your screen now, and our email address is thefinancequarter@your.abc.net.au. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Finance Quarter.